Hello, wonderful people out there watching from home. It's a beautiful day in America. We're live from Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America. Rock on, man.
Rock on. Absolutely.
Keep on rocking in the free world. Am I right?
That's pretty damn good. We're going to rock tonight.
Heck yeah, man. I'm Sam Lichtman. This is my dad, Allan Lichtman. Dad, tell him who you are.
Allan Lichtman, Distinguished Professor of History, American University in beautiful, not downtrodden, Washington, D.C.
Who's saying it's downtrodden?
Donald Trump, of course. Ever since he left, everything went to pieces, right?
Oh, right.
Right.
And even before he came, he said it was a big swamp, right?
It was all swamp. It was all carnage. He temporarily cleaned it up, and then it all went back to destruction.
I have to say, I was outside today. It was pretty nice.
It's wonderfully nice. And I wonder if Donald Trump has ever trod in those neighborhoods that he's always attacking.
Which neighborhoods are that?
Oh, you know, neighborhoods where people who don't look like him live.
Oh, like areas of Philadelphia, maybe?
Right.
Detroit,
remember where he said
maybe?
all the fraud was happening? Detroit, Philadelphia, Chicago,
right.
All the minority cities.
Right.
Atlanta.
Right. Okay. So from all that, I think the viewers have gleaned that it's a nice day in Washington, D.C., right?
It is. No carnage here.
Let's get into the news, though, because it's a pretty busy August compared to most Augusts. Am I right?
Yeah, you know, it's not a sleepy summer day, that's for sure. Things are happening one after the other. You know, that big mosaic that was 19 defendants is already beginning to break apart into little pieces. As defendants want to, including Trump, to sever their trial from the others. And in the case of Mark Meadows and perhaps Trump as well, to move their case into federal court. Now,
Disconnected. Give it a second. Yeah, give it a second. Okay, we're back. Go ahead.
Got it. All right. So several reasons why Mark Meadows and others might want to put their trial into federal court.
Tell me why, Dad.
All right. The Georgia case in state court is going to be televised.
Oh, right.
They don't want to be part of a televised trial. They don't want all that nefarious stuff beamed into everyone's living rooms. Two, it obviously delays matters. And three, it creates a wider jury pool than very Democratic, very minority Fulton County, where Atlanta is located. But it would be the same case, the same prosecutors. The only difference would be a different judge. And, you know, who knows if Meadows will be able to move his trial. But I got to say, his reasons were ludicrous. He is the chief of staff, not only of the president, but of the candidate. He has no business being anywhere near the electoral process in the states, much less arranging and sitting in that phone call where Donald Trump is pressuring the Secretary of State of Georgia, Raffensperger, a conservative Republican, to find exactly 11,800 votes to make him win the election, even though Raffensperger is constantly telling him, we've gone through multiple recounts, we've checked everything, there is no fraud, there's no basis for this. Trump is even threatening him. And, you know, one of the more ludicrous things I've heard from Mark Meadows, you know, when he interfered in the signature verifications in Georgia, he said, well, I was just visiting relatives and I happened to drop in. Isn't that what you always do when you're visiting relatives? Drop in on an electoral process?
I think every time.
Every time.
Explain to the people why, as thing real quick. 1 second, people, if I'm on. Okay, we're back. Explain to the people, Dad, why, as chief of staff, Mark Meadows should not and maybe legally cannot be near any election things. I don't know.
Several
I don't have a better
things.
word.
One, there is something called the Hatch Act. Doesn't apply to the president, but it does apply to Mark Meadows. If you're a federal employee, you cannot engage in partisan political activity. So he should have been nowhere near the process for trying to influence the outcome of the election. Secondly, for the White House overall, they have no role in state elections. They have no official duties in involving themselves in the process for state elections. Three, if this was something official, then in fact what they should have done was call in the Department of Justice, the proper officials, instead of having it, simply in the White House staff where it shouldn't belong. And of course, finally, Sam, a little bit of a conflict of interest here.
You would think so.
You think Trump had some interest in influencing the outcome of the election?
You would think
apart
so.
from his, beneficent concern with everything should be fair?
You would think so. What do you think are the chances that Meadows was successful in moving the trial to federal court?
Look, I'm not a lawyer, so, take this opinion for what it's worth. And it's a pretty low bar, but I don't think it's going to happen. It just makes no sense that interfering in a federal election is part of the official duties of the White House chief of staff, but in fact should be flatly prohibited by the Hatch Act.
Give me a percentage. I like percentages. I like clear-cut
I'd say
predictions.
he's got a 25% chance of getting this through.
Okay, that's not nothing, but...
It's not nothing, because it's a low bar.
It's pretty low, though. Rudolph Giuliani. You ever heard of him?
Yeah, I used to work for him, actually, back
What?
in 2000. Yeah, when he was mayor of New York, they had a charter review commission designed to revamp elections, and I was the civil rights advisor to the charter review commission.
Did you ever meet him?
I did not.
But you worked for the review commission that he was the
That
head
he
of?
set up, yeah.
Oh, that he set up.
It never went anywhere, but, I worked for, both under Giuliani, and then you know who his successor was?
In New York?
In New York. Then a Republican, no longer. Michael Bloomberg.
You gotta give me 2 seconds to answer, man.
No. This is like a quiz show. This is TV. You got to move fast.
I'm a thinker. I need a second.
Nah, the viewers don't want to sit and watch your wood burn here.
All right, fine. Well, so you don't have any good Giuliani stories then?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay.
Except I know that Giuliani is in deep trouble. I wrote about this. He mongered the most absurd lies in testifying to the Georgia state legislature about alleged fraud in Georgia, none of which existed, of course. Foreigners influencing the ballot, satellites beaming down God knows what into the election systems.
Boop, 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 boop.
Yeah. And, of course, horribly defamed to low-paid workers who were just trying to do their job to facilitate democracy. Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, of course, two African-American women who he claimed were terrible fraudsters, as did Donald Trump numerous times. And Giuliani played on some of the worst stereotypes of black people, saying they were passing around election thumb drives as if they were vials of heroin and cocaine. Of course, all of this was total lies, and those who followed anything knew they were lies. Now, in the defamation case involving the two African-American workers whose lives were totally upended and threatened by Trump's and Giuliani's lies, Giuliani admitted that he had lied, something, as I said, anyone who knew anything about the election knew, and was sanctioned for refusing to turn over discovery materials, and was now found liable for defaming the two women by the judge. And the only issue is, how much will Giuliani be liable for? I would guess it will be in the millions, but it's going to be, a cold day in August before anyone sees any actual payments from Giuliani. Giuliani and Trump never pay for anything.
Are you starting to feel bad for him? Be honest.
Absolutely not.
Oh, okay.
He's getting what he deserved.
What if he was a drunk? What if he was, on drugs? He had a real addiction problem, and that's why he's gone so far off the deep end. Then do you feel bad for him?
I don't think that's true. I
Okay.
think he made his own decisions to tie his destiny to Donald Trump, And that's why he went off the deep end. And he wasn't the only one. There were a lot of these defendants went off the deep end. I think one of them, Sidney Powell, proclaimed such absurd theories that, when she had some proceedings against her, she said, well, no one would really believe anything I said, was so outlandish. But we're talking about outlandish claims, but we're also talking about events to circumvent and subvert our democracy that came that close. Just that close, including the crackpot theory that somehow the vice president, a single individual, had the right to decide the outcome of elections, to override the verdict of the voters in the states. If that was the case, you'd never have a transfer of power, because the vice president would continually rule in their own administration.
That's a good point, Dad. We have a super chat, Dad.
All right.
From Connor Kotara.
I think he's a regular.
He's a regular, and I believe he's a regular super chatter. So thank you, Connor. That's extremely helpful. It keeps the stream going, basically.
Yeah, keep it up. It keeps us, in business.
Yeah. So he asks, in relation to the election of 2000, why don't you think Al Gore pushed as hard as Trump did when there was actual evidence in 2000?
It's a phenomenally good question. And I was screaming at the time that Al Gore was making a serious mistake. That his serious mistake was just calling for a recount in a few counties. He should have been calling for a statewide recount, which eventually the Florida Supreme Court ordered, but it came so late that when the U.S. Supreme Court stepped in, they were able to say, we have to stop the recount because we're bumping up against the safe harbor rule for certifying electoral votes in the states. Why that happened, I don't know. I do know, maybe until very recently, and things are beginning to change, the Republican Party has always been much better than the Democratic Party in playing hardball politics, and that was certainly true in 2000.
People in the chat, okay, we're having a little bit of fighting in the chat right now. Please keep your debates political. Do not make them personal, or I will block you. That's a promise, Dad, from Sam.
Yeah.
We have another super chat from
Awesome.
a recurring viewer, Captain M90s.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, you remember them.
Sure.
They say, if there is a brief recession early next year, but the economy rebounds in the summer, would that still change the short-term key?
If there is a deep recession during the election year, it would turn the short-term economic key. And, the chances of a noted recovery, that's recognized as a recovery, happening overnight is very, very small.
Okay. There's your answer. Anything to add before I go to the chat's questions about Giuliani's case, the defamation case, or Mark Meadows' plea to the judge to move it federal?
The Giuliani case is tied to the entire conspiracy that are laid out in the DA's RICO charge in Georgia. What Giuliani was doing, he was not a rogue actor. He was not acting on his own. These folks were all acting at the direction of Donald Trump as part of a broad effort taking place in multiple venues, including, lying about voter fraud, setting up fraudulent electors, pressuring state officials like the Georgia Secretary of State, pressuring state legislators, pressuring Donald Trump. It's all of a piece, and Giuliani was a big part of that, just as Giuliani was a big part of it, of the pressure campaign to pressure President Zelensky, the newly elected president of Ukraine, to investigate Donald Trump's political opponents. One of the great ironies of all of this is Trump keeps claiming the charges against him are the weaponization of the government to get me. Well, Donald Trump was the greatest expositor, the greatest practitioner of weaponizing the government against his political opponents, and was in fact impeached for it in the pressuring Zelensky to investigate Joe Biden, and also to validate the idea that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that intervened in the 2016 election.
Where's Russia?
Where is Russia?
You said Ukraine, not Russia. Where's Russia?
Are you making
I've never
fun
heard.
of my Brooklyn accent?
Maybe just a little bit. Keep going.
Yeah.
Or is that your last point?
Yeah.
We got big news. We got a $50 donation from Derek Taylor, who also last time was extremely generous in his donation.
It'll keep us going.
Thank you, Derek.
We're a shoestring operation.
You're single-handedly
We're
keeping
not Fox
the stream
News
alive.
that
Right.
can pay out $878 million and not blink.
Not quite. So Derek asks, when Mitch McConnell recently froze during questioning, there's been another solid push for Biden to drop out and let a younger candidate take his place. You should try. He's saying this is not a question. It's a tip. He said you should try to go on these news shows and try to convince them about the keys and why that's a bad idea. And you are doing that. I've seen.
Yeah.
We've got videos on our page that discuss that. I've seen other videos of you online that you say very clearly the keys say that Biden needs to be the Democratic nominee.
Yes, not because of Biden, but because he's the sitting president. That's the incumbency key. And because if he doesn't run, there's going to be a huge fight. There's no obvious heir apparent, and that's the party fight key. So if Biden doesn't run, the Democrats lose 2 keys right off the top. That means they only need 4 more keys, take 6 to defeat them, 4 more keys to lose. Biden runs and you win those 2 keys, they need 6 more keys. But let me even stand out aside from the keys. If Biden doesn't run, you have an open seat. And the party holding the White House almost always loses when there's an open seat. And inevitably, if there's both an open seat and an internal party fight. We saw that recently in 2016 for the Democrats and 2008 for the Republicans.
Thank you, Derek, for that donation and your comment as well. We've got a couple of people asking about Vivek Ramaswamy. Dad, what are your thoughts about him? And Alex Treefire, who's a common viewer, asks, what are the chances Vivek gets the nomination?
The chances that he gets the nomination are twofold, slim and none. He is not vying for the Republican nomination in 2004. The guy's 38, right? Biden's, early 80s. Trump is late 70s. He's got 40 more years based on this precedent to run. He is clearly positioning himself to be the next Trump. That is, after Trump leaves the scene, whether in 2024 or 2028, it doesn't really matter to Vivek. So he's got his eye on the future. He wants to inherit the Trump base. That's why he, like Donald Trump, says outlandish things like climate change is a hoax. Which is now,
correction.
Yeah.
I believe he said, just to be factually accurate, I believe he said the climate change agenda is a hoax, which is equally as ridiculous, but let's just be correct.
I thought he said climate change is a hoax, but you could be right. You're young and sharp. I'm old.
Actually, can I say something about Ramaswamy?
Sure.
I'm shocked why people are so impressed by this guy. It seems so clear to me, so obvious to me, that he has decided that his campaign strategy is to take out the right-wing playbook, read it, regurgitate it back to the base, and rise that way. And he's doing it for one reason and one reason only. You know why? I'm going to point the question to you, Dad. Why?
Why is he doing that?
Self-promotion.
Of course, he's not looking to
Right.
this nomination.
Wait, let me finish.
He's looking to inherit the Trump base.
Let me finish. And I think that Ramaswamy is a perfect example of what is wrong in America right now, because he will rise to power, as he's already doing, and in his wake, he will leave a cult-like following that in the end will gain little to no advantage or anything from his power or his success.
Worse yet.
Much
worse
like Donald
yet,
Trump.
He will threaten the survival of our planet and threaten the survival of our democracy.
Yes.
Much like Donald
Yes.
Trump.
The people who are following him like a cult, in the end, will get left in the dust. him being a future president or holding any other future power will gain them in the end nothing, much like many of Trump's supporters felt
Well, this is
in
the
2020
fallacy
and
of Trump
2016.
style, Ramaswamy style populism. They claim to be, for the little guy and woman, the ordinary Jane Does and Frank Rose. And yet, what is the one big accomplishment of the Trump administration? Big tax cuts for the rich. What are his other accomplishments? Deregulation of environmental regulations. And who suffers when our environment degrades? It's not the Donald Trumps of the world. It is the ordinary Americans. And who is hurt by the devastations of climate change? Again, it's not rich people, elites like Donald Trump. It's ordinary Americans who can't move, can't hire their own security, can't, store their own food and water.
Exactly. All right, we've got a couple super chats, Dad.
Awesome.
Connor Contara didn't ask a question but made a statement. They said, I'm a Republican and a Trump supporter, but not a die-hard Trump supporter. But I do love hearing from you and your history on previous elections. I think you are amazing, and I have your books as well.
Thank you.
So look, we have Trump supporters in the chat too, guys.
That's fine.
That's fine. Yeah,
I have
of
Trump
course.
supporters in all my classes.
Right.
And here's the thing. We all have our political opinions, even those who claim they don't. There was an editor of the Washington Post that I don't even vote because I want to be neutral. Right. That's just a sham. But our analysis, our work as historians, as political analysts, are separate and apart from our political opinions. Do you think, I wanted to predict Donald Trump, that was my bias? No, that hardly made me popular in 90-plus Democratic Washington, D.C., but that's the way my analysis came down. My first prediction, way back in the early 80s, was Ronald Reagan.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you get a lot of flack from a lot of people of being biased, of being partisan, but I think, yeah, obviously you have your own political leaning, but I think most of your analysis is as objective as you can get in the political arena.
Let me give our audience a little lesson. What is the secret to being a successful political forecaster? It ain't knowing math, although you got to know math. It ain't knowing history, although you got to know history. It ain't knowing politics, although you got to know politics. It is putting aside your own political preferences and analyzing the data as it comes. And that's hard. That's
Yes,
really
it is.
hard.
We got a couple more super chats.
All right.
Ginger Bearded Elf says, how likely is it that Trump is disqualified from running or imprisoned / under a house arrest before the election? How likely? We've wavered on this a little bit. Where are you at today, Dad?
Yeah.
Give me a.
I think it's 50-50 that
No.
he's either in prison or house arrest, but that doesn't stop him from running.
But then they're asking specifically.
Well, that's another question. There are
disqualified.
two different questions. Being convicted of a felony, even being in prison, doesn't stop you from running. What can stop you from running is the third section of the 14th Amendment, which says those who took an oath of office to protect the Constitution and then rose in rebellion cannot serve in the federal government again. And there is a pretty substantial movement now to try to get secretaries of state and other state officials to keep Trump off the ballot. If that happens, this is going to go to the Supreme Court. It's unsettled. Who knows what they might rule? I suspect they're not going to rule Trump off the ballot, but who knows?
Thank you, Ginger Bearded Elf. That was their first super chat. Thank you so much. We've got another super chat from Warrior Pride 65. They say, what are your thoughts on Marianne Williamson as a candidate? Big if, but if she takes the DNC nomination, would she get the charisma key?
I don't know enough about her to even begin to make that decision. She has no chance to win the Democratic nomination. Even if Biden wasn't running, she has no chance to win the Democratic nomination. So I haven't really focused on whether she would win the charisma key, but I doubt it.
I like her as a person. I mean, I think she makes some really good points. I know she's a little bit kind of out there for a lot of people.
A little out there, a little ultra.
But a little what?
Outre, O-U-T-R-E. It's a fancy way of saying out there.
Gotcha. Okay. Ross Goldberg, recurring viewer, asks, why won't the GOP party leaders try to move back to the center? Good question, Ross.
You know, there is not you, but there's a big fallacy among political analysts.
I'm not a political analyst.
Right. The punditry.
Right.
You watch the television, listen.
Why do you say not me? When have I ever been a political pundit?
I said not you.
Okay, anyways. Go
Not
ahead.
you.
Okay.
Everyone but Sam Lichtman.
Right.
Yeah. And there's, Donald Trump versus mainstream Republicans. There's an old Zen saying, unask the question. Unask that question. Donald Trump is the Republican mainstream. Donald Trump is the mainstream now of the Republican Party. And you really need to understand that. It wasn't me, but one observer, scholar said, you're thinking Trump has abandoned conservatism and Republicans, then why are all conservatives, with a few exceptions, uniting behind him? Why is the rank and file of the Republican Party uniting behind him? Why is the vast majority of Republican elected officials uniting behind him? It's easy to say it's a cult, but that's wrong too. It is now the center of the Republican Party.
Thank you, sir, Allan Lichtman, sir, and thank you, Ross, for that question. We've got a good question from Mohammed Bakshalapur. I hope I pronounced that right.
That's pretty good, yeah.
Do you think the Republicans will eventually acknowledge climate change, especially after events like Adalia or the there's so many events now. Do you think they'll ever acknowledge it, or when would they acknowledge it?
There's an old story about a famous 19th century philosopher, a skeptical philosopher, who finally said, I've come to accept the universe. And the response of the great Ralph Waldo Emerson was, you'd better. Well, they'd better, because climate change is no longer a projection, a prediction. It is here. It is now. It is present. And the hurricanes, the wildfires, the droughts, the floods, the tornadoes. We're at the edge of livability with some of the temperatures we're seeing in our Southwest and parts of Asia. So they'd better. If not, they pose a clear and present danger to our survival on this planet.
Did you answer the question?
Not really.
Are you going to?
I think it's going to be a while. I don't think I think it will happen eventually, but too late.
Okay. We've got another super chat, Dad, from
Awesome.
Alex Shim, and that's Alex's first super chat. So thank you so much, Alex. Foreign policy question for you, Dad. A U.S.-China war over Taiwan would be terrible. Wouldn't the U.S. be better staying out of a war between China and Taiwan?
What the U.S. is trying to do is deter China from attacking Taiwan. Even if the U.S. wasn't involved, that would be a horrific war. Taiwan is no pushover. Obviously, China has a vastly larger population and a vastly larger military, but the Taiwanese are fiercely loyal to what they see as their country. They're a very advanced country, and they have a very strong military. Can you see a little analogy here? A very large country with a big military invading a small country?
Ukraine.
Exactly. And, how did that go for the Russians?
Not very good. Not very good at all. RBC asks, when do you think you'll make a prediction regarding the keys, Dad?
Well, once the keys fall in place, I can make a prediction. But I can't predict when the keys will fall in place. Sometimes they fall in place quite early. In the very difficult to call 2012 election, that a lot of the pundits were calling for Romney as late as October 2012. I called that for Obama in 2010. Whereas in the 2016 election, I didn't call it until, I think, September of the election year. I don't expect it's going to go that far this time. But I think I've mentioned to all my viewers last time what you should be looking for. And there are 4 keys that are particularly important. The 2 economic keys, long and short term, the two foreign policy keys, failure and success, and possibly the third party keys. I don't think that's going to come to anything, but we've heard a lot of rumblings anyway.
Rumblings and bumblings, am I right?
Bumblings is right. I mean,
Obama Soda, who is a concurrent viewer. How's it going, Obama Soda?
All right.
Allan, could Biden use Ukraine right now as a foreign military win? Try to convince Americans that Ukraine stands because of the U.S.?
I don't think yet. There's still too much that's happening. A lot's going to depend upon the fate of this counteroffensive on the part of Ukraine. If they can recapture some of the Russian-occupied territory, then I think he could claim a success. From my view, it's already a success because it was Biden and Biden alone who organized the West to unite behind the defense of Ukraine. If Biden hadn't acted, Russia would be right now, in fact, a year ago already, in control of Ukraine. For some reason, again, the pundits seem to have missed all that, and Biden isn't getting credit for it. I don't think I've ever seen a situation where a president is getting so little credit for anything he did. Not just in Ukraine, but Biden has the largest complement of domestic policy achievements since the 1960s and has gotten almost zero credit for it. It's Trump and all his bluster and lies that dominates the airwaves because it creates ratings, and Biden's more quiet but vastly more significant accomplishments have been sadly overlooked.
So I think it's fair to say that you don't see that as a key turning event yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, because
I haven't turned those foreign policy keys one way or the other as yet. So there are 4 or 5 keys still up in the air.
Right. Some people were asking in the chat about that, if that was if Ukraine is a key defining war or foreign policy situation. And you're saying no.
Not yet. We'll know a lot more a year from now.
But the chances of them taking back Russian territory is so low. Can it be a win without that happening?
Possibly. It all depends upon exactly what the outcome is and how it is understood.
Captain M90s with a super chat asking, how will the situation in Ukraine be a failure? Is that possible?
Sure. If the Russians push back and recapture more territory, then it could be considered a failure. At this point, it's not a failure. In fact, I'd say it's a remarkable success that Ukraine has been able to withstand the Russians for so long, and Russians haven't captured really any new territory.
Yeah, but wars are judged after the fact. I guess your keys are more current, but they could be winning for years and then totally lose in the end. I don't want that to happen, obviously, but I'm just saying, anything could happen, right?
Right, but at some point you're going to have to turn the key. You can't wait indefinitely.
Sure. Another super chat from Derek Taylor. Thank you, Derek. I don't know if you want to answer this or not. So Derek,
I've answered everything.
Well, Derek, he probably won't answer this, but I'll ask him. If you call your prediction now, would Biden win re-election?
Oh, I'm not going to answer that.
Told you, Derek.
Smart kid.
Derek, I know this guy. I told you he wasn't going to answer.
Yeah, I don't answer hypothetical questions about the keys.
Jacob Antonero, a recurring viewer. What's up, Jacob? Say, what's up, Jacob?
What's up, Jacob, man?
What's up, Jacob, man?
What's up, Jacob?
He said, how will BRICS expansion affect U.S. foreign policy if Iran joins BRICS? That's, if you don't know, that's Brazil, Russia, India, China.
Setting that up. We lost.
Yeah, hold on. Give me a second. All right. I think we're back. We lost connection. Again, this is a question from Jacob Antonero. How will BRICS expansion affect U.S. foreign policy if Iran joins?
Yeah. I think it would be certainly a setback for U.S. foreign policy. I'm not sure it would matter all that much in the big picture since Iran is already so closely tied. One of the extraordinary things about Donald Trump's defense in one of his civil trials was, I was too busy preventing nuclear war to deal with fraud in my business. Well, Donald Trump did one of the worst foreign policy maneuvers that makes nuclear war a lot more likely, and that is to pull out of the Iran Accords, which were working, not just according to, a Democratic administration, but according to Donald Trump's own, own departments and the international community. It was working to prevent Iran from developing a nuclear weapon. Donald Trump promised to get a much better treaty. He always promises bigger and better. He didn't. He got no treaty, and Iran now is much more likely to develop a nuclear weapon and start a nuclear arms race in the most unstable part of the world.
Thank you for that question, Jacob. The anonymous bear with a super chat, they ask, is Ukraine part of the reason why you haven't turned the foreign policy key one way or the other?
The answer is yes. I think I explained that. Ukraine could go either way. And, at this point, it's a bit inconclusive. It may still be inconclusive a year from now, but I'll have to make a decision then.
Yeah, wars can change pretty quickly. I mean, don't they say that World War II changed on one decision or one miscommunication that happened in France between German generals or something like that? Do they say that? Isn't there something like that?
Well, we did break the codes, both German and Japanese, and that was very important. But there was no one single turning point. World War II was a grind, and it was through grinding that the Allies prevailed in both sections. Now we can debate, if there was one turning point, was it the dropping of the atomic bomb on Nagasaki and Hiroshima? And that's a matter of huge historical controversy.
But Germany had already surrendered before that.
Right, but there was no single event that turned the war against Germany. In fact, even after the Normandy landing, the war was still in doubt until we won the Battle of the Bulge following the landing.
Right, yeah. But in the early times of the war, people thought Germany was going to run away with Europe, basically, right? Or am I wrong about that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Especially once they took over Paris and France.
But, Germany, of course, made the enormous mistake of invading Russia, and then the enormous mistake after Pearl Harbor of declaring war against the U.S. The U.S. did not first declare war against Germany. Germany declared war against the U.S. after Pearl Harbor, bringing the United States into the two-front war.
Yes, indeed. Here's a interesting question from Shades Guy. They say, could Lichtman name every president who has ever won the charisma key? Could you do that, Dad?
Sure.
Oh, here we go. Drum roll, please. Can he do it?
Start with Lincoln.
Good start.
That's a really good start. Teddy Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt. John F. Kennedy. Ronald Reagan. Barack Obama. Don't think I missed anyone.
They don't call him a maverick for no reason, folks. I guess somebody in the chat could fact check that because I don't have the bandwidth to fact check that right now. But
no need to.
Eisenhower? No.
Oh, Eisenhower, yes. Thank you. But that wasn't the charisma key, though.
What was that?
That was the war hero key, which it's the same key, but it's charisma / war hero. So I only named presidents who won the charisma. And there were, if you want to get into war hero, you had Grant and Eisenhower.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Connor, for that save there, Connor.
Yeah.
Why didn't you think Clinton was charismatic, says C. Edward.
Yeah. Clinton is a bit like Trump. In a sense, he was charismatic, but he also had this dark side. He was the first president since Andrew Johnson back in the 1860s to be impeached. He had this awful reputation as a womanizer. So because he had this dark side, I never gave him the charisma key. Just as Trump has this dark side, even though, like Clinton, he has a certain, charismatic appeal.
President Nieto, one of our many presidents in the chat, has given us a super chat. Let's give him a round of applause, Dad. Thank you, President Nieto. He says, or they say, I don't know if it's a he or she, they say, if something were to happen to Biden and VP Harris ascends to the presidency, would she have the incumbency key?
Absolutely. Gerald Ford. had the incumbency. It wasn't enough to predict his win in '76 against Jimmy Carter, but the key just says sitting president. It doesn't make exceptions for how you become the sitting president. Lyndon Johnson had the the sitting president key in 1964. Harry Truman had it in 1948. Theodore Roosevelt had it in 1904.
Thank you, President Nieto. I appreciate that.
Great question.
All right. We are hitting 40 minutes here, folks.
Take a couple more.
Take a couple more questions. So get your questions
Particularly if we have, those, what do you call them?
The super chats.
Super chats.
Yes. Here's a question from Staffer. Are Democrats losing ground in Nevada, Dad?
Are Democrats losing ground in what?
Nevada, the state of Nevada.
It's becoming maybe a little more purplish instead of blue, but I have every confidence that Biden, and I'm presuming he's the nominee, will win the state of Nevada. And while I don't put any stock in early polls, the early polls do show Biden with a pretty substantial lead in Nevada. Again, in terms of the Electoral College, standing outside the keys for a moment, it's going to be the same states. It's going to be Arizona,
Right.
Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs, really,
Why?
because most states are irrelevant. Most people's vote is irrelevant. I live in Maryland. Does my vote count as opposed to those
Right.
who live in Michigan?
Right. I see what you're saying. We got a $1 donation from HIT. Thank you, HIT. And they say, "Hi, Professor. I'm a fan of your 13 Keys model. I was wondering if you could clarify what the benchmark for a major policy change is."
Yeah. Again, you got to read the book. I can't give you the whole analysis. But number one, the benchmark is always how the key has been turned in the past. And the system goes back to 1984 prospectively and 1860 retrospectively. So we have 160 years of answers to that question. But the benchmarks are, and again, you got to read the book, got to buy the book, of course, right?
Buy the book.
Buy the book. One, a major series of policies. The examples would be, the Reagan conservative policies, the Lyndon Johnson Medicare, Medicaid, Civil Rights Act. Second point would be a major shift from the previous administration. And we've seen that. That's why I give Biden the key in areas like immigration, climate change, regulations. Biden has fundamentally shifted policy from the Trump administration.
Another donation from Connor Kotara. Thank you, Connor.
All right.
This is a good question. Do you think Biden will keep the states he flipped in 2020 in the next election year? Arizona, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia. Will he keep those in 2024?
I can't answer that till
Why?
I call the keys, because that's going to decide the election. I can't tell you how the election is going to come out.
Because they're so key that you can't tell if they're going to flip or not until the keys are in place? Okay.
Yeah. Everybody wants me to give a prediction, and if I gave a prediction prematurely, what would it be worth?
Zip.
Zip.
Zilch. Nada.
Nada. Nothing.
I thought
Nor.
maybe you could say, I think for sure he'll keep Pennsylvania. The others, I'm not sure. Or something like that.
No, I'm not going to do that.
Okay, he's not going to do that. Sorry, Connor.
You got to stay tuned. That's another reason why you need to keep following.
That's true. You got to stay tuned.
If I gave it all away now,
Ross Goldberg asked, do you think that neoliberalism is finally dying?
That's a very complicated question. I don't think there's any such thing as neoliberalism. Again, it's a misunderstanding of not just pundits this time, but scholars. The idea of neoliberalism is kind of going back to the old 19th century idea of government doesn't interfere in the economy at all. It just lets, the market decide things. That's never been the policy of conservatives. What was the major policy of conservatives when they arose in the modern era in the 1920s. Protective tariffs. And who revived protective tariffs again? Donald Trump revived protective tariffs. Then there are business subsidies, special tax breaks, export guarantees, price controls. So I think neoliberalism is a misnomer. What is really going on among conservatives is support for private enterprise, not free enterprise, which can involve all kinds of interventions on the part of government to promote private enterprise and to stop unions, of course, like the Taft-Hartley Act and Ronald Reagan's decertification of PATCO, the Air Traffic Controllers Union.
Right.
This is not part of the free market.
Andrew, one of our concurrent viewers, is upset. Andrew, I don't see a question from you. I've been asking, I think, more non-Super Chat questions than Super Chat questions, actually.
We need to wrap up soon, I
Yeah,
think.
but Andrew, I don't see your question. I will certainly read your question, whether it's a donation or not. Andrew, if you're still out there, ask a question. Benji, I see you too. If you have a question, go ahead and ask.
One more question.
One more question.
How long have we been going? 46
46 minutes.
Yeah, that's about the limit.
Let's see. I'll wait for a new question. Whoever's got a burning question, throw it in the chat. Doesn't have to be a donation. Again, I'm reading all questions, not just donation questions. He's answered the Hunter Biden laptop question.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't count for a scandal for
No,
Biden
it does
because
not.
it's not Biden. Any other questions out there, guys?
It's not even Hunter Biden. We don't know what Hunter Biden did.
I know what Hunter Biden did.
What do you do?
I don't know.
You don't
I'm not seeing.
You know, here's what really, amazes me. Republicans are up in their arms that maybe not even Joe, but Hunter, the son, got, I don't know how much, 10, 20 million dollars from foreign sources. How much did Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump get from the Saudis?
A lot. I don't know.
$2 billion, but that's just fine.
Also, he's answered the 14th Amendment question, guys.
I did.
If you go back to last week, we talked about that quite a bit.
One more question. You can ask me. We got one?
Nothing that we kind of haven't already touched on or is not super relevant to what we're talking about right now. Here's a random question for you.
I love random questions, but I may give a random answer.
What's your opinion on Grover Cleveland?
So that's an interesting question. Grover Cleveland represented the last gasp of the old 19th century Democratic Party. That is, people don't realize, back then the Democratic Party was the party of states' rights, the party of limited government, the party of hard money. And he was then challenged, although he wasn't running again, but the Cleveland philosophy was challenged in the election of 1896 by William Jennings Bryan, who was kind of the forerunner of the modern progressive liberal Democratic Party, making the transition from the party of Grover Cleveland. So that's a really good, interesting question.
And with that, folks, we will wrap up.
Who would have thought we'd wrap up with Grover
Who
Cleveland?
would have thought we'd wrap up with Grover Cleveland? If you're still in the chat, we got 99 people watching, but only 35 likes on the video. Please, 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 just click like. If you're not subscribed already, which our analytics says 55% of our viewers are not subscribed.
Oh, no.
You got to subscribe, guys. It keeps us going. Takes a lot of time, energy, and money to get to produce these things. So we need your help. A like is the best, is great. The likes are going up. We're already up to 50 likes. That's what I like to see,
right.
folks. Subscribe.
And we don't have a mugshot, to fundraise on.
We have no mugshots to fundraise
mugshots.
off of. I could Photoshop one for you if we really wanted to, but we don't have any real ones. Some shout outs who people who are still watching. Ross Goldberg, shout out to you. Bienvenida Garinet, shout out to you. Ziggy Stardog, Staffer,
We getting
Shades Guy,
subscribers?
Alex Trifier, I can't see that right now.
Okay.
Obama Soda.
Wow, Great.
Thank you guys. Joshua D, thank you so much. Michael DeSouza. Michael DeSouza Cruz, always in here. Alex Shim, thank you very much. Have a good night, guys. Goodbye.
Good night.